everybody, welcome to Friday episode of the Dobbin Bandits. I'm Orrin Phillips, and we are back today talking about Captain Action. Captain Action is coming back in a big way, especially this year, 2025. So who better talk about it than Ed Catto? And he is bringing along a friend. He's bringing along Michael Polis. Michael is a TV producer. He's worked with Jim Henson Company along with numerous other cartoons, television shows. They are working together. There's a plan in place for Captain Action. Have a very, very, very big year. Check the link in the comments. We're putting in where you can get this new Captain Action figure, which is out there, which is absolutely phenomenal. So if you love Captain Action, like I know a lot of us do, you're going to want to hear what they have to say. So without further ado, here we go. Phillips, and we are talking Captain Action today because we have the one and only Ed Catto, and today we welcome Michael Polis. Sir, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Good to see you, Oren.
Good to see you. So we're just talking a little bit before we got on, but Michael, how did you first meet Ed?
Gosh, I met Ed years and years ago, back when he was at an agency, and we hit it off because we were both ex consumer packaged goods guys. He was at P&G, and I was with
General Foods.
division of Philip Morris, yeah, General Foods. So
Yeah.
crazy that we were both in that space.
Yeah. That those jobs, by the way, Oren, those jobs were really cool in the old days. Now MBAs don't gravitate, but in the old days, that was where it was at. I gotta tell you.
Now, Michael, are you a comic book fan too, like Ed is?
So when I was a kid, my next door neighbor, Joey Melchione, if
Mhm.
he's listening, his dad was a pharmacist,
Okay.
and he would bring home stacks of comic books. And I had my meager, 50 cents or whatever I had that week that I could buy. So I became a comic book fan at a very young age. It got me into drawing, it got me into storytelling, and kind of propelled the whole thing. But yeah, I've been around and had a passion for comics for a very long time.
What were your go-to books?
So I reluctantly admit being as a kid, being a bit of a Marvel zombie to a degree. I like the craziness of some of the DC stuff. The bizarro characters and Batmites that would show up. But I really got into like I'd say a pretty eclectic taste. Like I love the EC horror stuff. I found a lot of independent books. I thought, what Pacific Comics did for years and kind of the whole introduction of the direct market really expanded the horizons of lots of different types of products and books that could be delivered. I mean, it was I would say I'm kind of all over the place in some ways, but if you looked at the collection that I've got, it is kind of curated, but it is a lot about artists, writers, and stories that resonate with me.
And that's funny because Ed and I were just saying that he's also one of those guys that he just finds something cool and he just wants to read it, especially a lot with the older stuff as well.
Oh yeah. One of the things that we'll be at San Diego working together at the booth, and Michael works much harder than me, and we'll be exhausted, and dead. And then it's like, hey, where'd Michael go? Or where did Ed go? And invariably we're going through the back issue bins, and Michael will come back with the treasure, like, hey, look what I got, and that's all part of the fun.
So, Michael, how did you find yourself in now the entertainment industry?
So it's funny, like uh, when I was there's one thing. So this guy Neil Gaiman, I worked on a project with Neil Gaiman. I'll talk about that in a minute. But one of the things that he had said was, he said it's like it's not the things that shout at you, it's the niggling things that keep at you that you have to listen to over your lifetime. And I think that's 100% true. So with entertainment, I always wanted to draw. I always wanted to get involved in storytelling, et cetera. And I end up at General Foods, which is the least storytelling. It's like cheese and cereal, and so you had to make that exciting. And I got a phone call from this woman, Karen Starr, who I'm forever indebted to, who said, "There's this job at Universal Studios that you should really go out for." And I'm born and raised in New York,
Mhm.
and I said, there's no way I'm going to move to California. I'm not going to do it. It's like, well, just go on the interview anyway. They'll pay to fly you out and everything. And so, like an idiot, I got a flight on Sunday, interviewed all day Monday, and then on Tuesday, went back to work at General Foods. And long story short, they made me an offer. And I thought, what do I have to lose? So I went out and worked in at Universal for a number of years. Started out in the home entertainment business, and then that blossomed into other areas. But yeah, that was the thing, and it was that calling of, you know what, I always wanted to tell stories, and now's an opportunity to get involved in that business directly.
And for you, Ed, we've spoken before about Captain Action, your love for Captain Action, bringing it back because it has such a rich history, and it's a character that you could do so much with. What was it about Michael that you said, okay, this is somebody I need on this team to bring this back?
Oh yeah, well, Joe and I started. I'm not sure how well you know Joe Ahern, but Joe and I started the Captain Action thing, and then we crossed paths with Michael a couple times. I think was it through Rotterdam or something we met, Michael? I
It
don't
was
know.
through Rotterdam way at the beginning when I was visiting the DC offices
Oh,
because we were doing I was looking at some custom work that we
oh
were going to
yeah.
try and do and some cross promotion with Warner.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then meeting Michael, like I'd encourage you to dig a little deeper. Or this guy has done so many cool things and been on so many cool projects. And as you hear what Michael's done, it's also impressive. But then also the way that he approaches problems and the way that he has like a tenacity and a focus and those things together, it always makes me feel like a slacker. I mean, the stuff he does uh, is so very positive. Good guy to be around, and so that's why it's a pleasure for me to work with a guy like Michael.
That's
Can I extend this to my family? This
Sure.
is fantastic. Ed, I'm flattered. I'm completely flattered. Thank you for saying
Oh,
such
absolutely.
kind things.
It's
And
all
back
true,
at you,
Mike. I'm
man.
not just, blowing, smoke up the podcast microphone today.
But I mean, Michael, you've been like as Ed said, Yo Gabba Gabba, Bear in the Big Blue House, like a number of projects that you've been a part of that have become for so many people part of their childhood, part of their upbringing. Um, when you're a part of shows like that, what are some of the big lessons you learned business wise from being part of those projects?
There's this weird butterfly effect that like you kind of forget about.
Mhm.
I remember this guy, Rick Recadal, he's DreamWorks executive who he went on to do some teaching and he invited me to come in and talk to one of his classes. So I'm thinking, all these kids are, they're 19, 20. They're not going to really know maybe some of the stuff that I've worked on. So I said, have you ever heard of Land Before Time? The Land Before Time, and it was like gophers, like raising their heads up during class. And I said, 'cause I worked on all the sequels for Land Before Time, two, three, four, five, all the way to I don't know. I think there were like 13 by the time we were done. And they were all like, some of the kids got emotional about it and saying that, Littlefoot and Sarah were a part of my childhood and I grew up with them and it got me into this business. And then we talk about stuff like Bear in the Big Blue House and it's like, what? And then Yo Gabba Gabba, it's like, are you kidding me? So it to me, it's that, sometimes you don't realize the impact that you have with the things that you do in your career while you're in the middle of doing them. And those are the best ones to have, as long as they're positive.
Right. Now, you found success, a good project. What was it about Captain Action that you said, you know what, I think this thing has legs to it. I want to get involved.
So, a couple of things so I basically missed Captain Action as a kid, right? I was just a little bit too young
Mhm.
for it, but I remember like older brothers and seeing, and funnily enough, I found later on a Robin costume that I had somehow in a toy box when I was, a kid. So I knew of the character, but didn't really know much about, I knew enough to be dangerous.
Right.
And Ed and Joe are obviously incredibly knowledgeable about it. But what I saw in it in terms of potential is that, here you got this character that has, you know, comic book royalty as a part of the comic book versions of it. Um, between Shooter, Wally Wood, Gil Kane. I mean, these are like big names that decided to work on this licensed comic book. And when you looked at the toys, they were so fun and compelling in this, borrowed equity component of creating uniform sets that this guy could turn into these different characters. It was really compelling and fun. So I thought, you know what? There's got to be a way, because there's only that very short narrative that was created around the comic books that is very, it's a very of its time, 1960s kind of idea that with a fantastic name like Captain Action, that could be turned into something even more fun and interesting from a products perspective as well as from an entertainment perspective.
And Ed, we've spoken before about Captain Action. There's been different versions of him through the years, but he's someone that it's a character that I think you had said there's not a ton of backstory, so you can kind of jump into it and not feel like, well, if I don't know who this, and this is, I'm never going to catch up with what's going on now.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, one of my granddaughters came up for Thanksgiving
Mhm.
and she says, "Hey, Grandpa, can we play superheroes?" Right? I'm like, of course. Let's play for 10 hours, honey. And it was interesting. So we got out some action figures, and it was interesting to see how she played. And she's
Mhm.
like, "No, no, this person does this, and no, you can't say that, Grandpa. They got to do that." And I would posit that that's kind of a little bit like Captain Action. Like on one hand, there's a certain mythology from the DC books or from the original ideal book, or or some of the stuff that we've kind of reinvented and tried to do over the years. But on the other hand, there's like a million of them. Like every little kid has their own idea of hey, here's what he does. He lives in a cave. He's from a satellite. He's really a spy. He's really a whatever. And and that's kind of fun, right? So it's not, if you don't know what issue Spider-Man first fought Electro, certain people will look down their nose at you. But if you don't know what happened to Captain Action at a different point in time, it's like, yeah, that's okay. Who cares? Let's have fun. And that's kind of some of the things that we try and bring to all of the things that we do.
Definitely.
Oren, I was going to say too that one of the big things that attracted me to this was there's a history behind Captain Action that is really important. And it's really important in just the toy collecting space, toy history, in that um, when the toy was originally created, which is this, the guy who invented it, his first toy was G.I. Joe. Then Captain Action was the second one, and Captain Action is the original superhero uh, action figure.
Mhm.
And I don't think I think we need to do a better job of kind of promoting that more and letting people know that this is a part of toy history, and it is really compelling and an important part of that Captain Action lore.
Yeah.
It's funny. Last night we were talking to Rick Goldschmidt, who's the historian for Rankin Bass, and he has such a collection of different things. And we said, well, what's the most, thing you prize possession you have in your collection? And he said it's his Captain Action display with his toys. And he said whenever folks come to the house, even if they don't know who the character is, they're drawn to it and they want to know more about it. So you're right. There's something about the history. There's something about how it's put together that just leads people right into it.
Yeah.
Uh, what right now, in the entertainment business, it was movies used to be the ultimate thing. Is that still how it is now? Because with streaming platforms now and people watching so much on their phones, um, what would you want, you know, the ultimate thing to be for this project as far as entertainment goes?
it's a great question because the landscape is really shifted.
Mhm.
You can see what's going on currently right now. It's like a rolling earthquake that unfortunately hasn't stopped. So you're right. Film was always kind of the pinnacle of you get big movie stars, turn it into something that becomes the circus coming to town, and it's a big, broad spectacle. Right now, the biggest things that are working in that space are the 200 million plus spectaculars. Like, currently it's Wicked. But and it's the give me something that's pre-existing. Like, give me something new but tried and true. And it's like, okay, well, you kind of gotta pick and choose. And one of the challenges in that space is you're seeing so many retreads. I mean, there's when you start looking at movies that have the number five after it or 10. I mean, if you're in Fast and Furious land, I mean, there are a ton of movies in that space. So breaking in and having a film made with the something brand spanking new is really challenging because of that. Um, the attention that you need to get from a movie studio, um, it sadly requires them to spend a ton of money in order to have the attention because they're on the hook. So they know that, if it's a $200 million movie, they're going to spend another 100 million plus in just P&A. So going back to your digital question, series does become more important. But one of the strategies, one of the challenges rather with series today is it doesn't have the same kind of promotional aspect that you would get where 20 years ago on broadcast you would get 20 promos a day about this new thing to check out, and so there's a consistency in marketing. Right now it's competing for tiles on a screen that disappear really rapidly as you're scrolling through, so word of mouth becomes important. So they're also looking for pre-established properties that may have a story to tell, that can run in series. So I the short answer is, um, I'm not sure whether or not, like, look, if I had $200 million, then yes, I know where we'd go, but I think it's unlikely that that would happen. So the idea is to either make a lower budget film. If you look at, Godzilla minus one, that was a $14 million movie, that budget. That was very low. So if you take something like that and say, okay, if we did something for under 15
Mhm.
that has the action and the character development and the story behind it really is compelling, and with visual effects becoming cheaper and cheaper, that is one avenue that we're really pursuing, and then using that as an opportunity to spin off into series.
And this is a question for both of you. And Ed, I'll start with you. It used to be with where we are right now with the MCU and DCU, comic books planted the seeds for that. Comic books were there first and it drew interest and it gets to where we are now. With a project like this, do you think a comic book would need to come out first in order to garner some interest, or are we past the point where that's not a viable thing anymore to get eyes on a project?
Oh, well, there's let me start by saying Heidi McDonald just published a long article. She's calling it the big lie. And then she said, well, maybe it's not a lie, maybe it's like the big con. But that's that whole idea of like creators do a comic and then it turns into something huge. Like, Walking Dead is or The Boys might be an example of that. But, oftentimes, most times, that doesn't happen like that. Or, even like Dave Stevens, we're into Dave Stevens because we're doing this great Rocketeer project. Like, he had Disney produce a faithful version of his comic that he labored over, and it was in the after the weekend box office they said no, we're not going to do any more, way back in the 90s. And so most times it doesn't really work like that. I think that one of the things that I kind of am figuring out is a truism or a north star is that you got to just make something that's good or something that you feel very passionate about. So, if it's a comic or if it's a toy and you're doing it just to, use it as a sales brochure, everybody can see that. People can see that a million miles away. And, if you do something that you love and you're passionate about, it's going to stand on its own 2 feet, and then maybe it'll give you an opportunity to do something different. So, Joe, Michael, and I kind of, try and do that where we're always looking at new opportunities and excited for new opportunities. But like every little thing we do, I mean, we probably spend too much time thinking about it and figuring it out and what's the package going to be like and what about this, and we really put a lot of elbow grease and a lot of love. And I think that on one hand you could say, oh, that's you're a little overly detailed about that, but I think if you're not, you're creamed, you're out of the game, forget about it.
And Michael, my question for you is sort of based on that, but when I was a kid, Batman '89 comes out. My friends and I run out to get every Batman comic we get our hands on. Spider-Man, we want to get our Spider-Man book, Superman, this and that. Nowadays, people, oh, I'm a huge Marvel fan. Okay, well, what's your favorite comic? Oh, I don't read the comics. You could
Mhm.
say, hey, there's all these stories about these characters you like that's taken place in the past, but that bridge seems to have disappeared. Is there any way to rebuild it, or are we just living in a totally different world at this point?
It's funny. This is years ago. This is kind of around the time that I was talking with when I first met Ed. Um, there are two guys that I would talk to about how do we save comics. This is back when it was Paul Levitz and Dennis Kitchen, completely different ends of the spectrum, right? I mean, um, and because one of the challenges back then was, now it's all comic shops. You're not walking through the grocery store and picking something up and and can grab it and read it and get enthralled by an image and a story and all the rest. Um, the thing that you're pointing out is that Marvel specifically has transcended the comic shop and is now a much bigger part of popular culture, and it is embedded in kind of everything, between that and Star Wars and all the rest. So I think that the the thing that allows or the thing that's great about comics and the thing that is really fascinating is this idea of taking this mythology and telling and honing that story over years and years and years. Like all that Marvel mythology and all of that storytelling was the best of Marvel's comic books for what, 70 years, 60, I mean, all that stuff didn't just spring out of nowhere, like, over a weekend. So it took a long time to get there. Um, but I do think that there are new distribution methods that kids are picking up on, between all the digital comics that are out there. They're more popular. Some are more popular in Asia, for example, than they are here. But so there are new ways. It's just a different way of telling stories rather than potentially the floppy books that we grew up with that are used to going and picking up. Um, and then the other thing is the economics of it. If I have to wait 5 months at $5 a pop to get one complete story, that ends up being a bit challenging, right? Like I like to be able to get my story every day or every couple of days or every week. I'm onto something. So there are some challenges that comics specifically have, but there are also some huge benefits. The artwork, um, the um, the fact that from a development perspective, it's a lot cheaper to build a universe, destroy it, rebuild it again on paper than it is with CG effects. So I still think that there's a place for comics. It needs to economically and in terms of its ability to deliver content more rapidly, has to, and it's starting to find its way, but it's
Yeah.
slow.
And let me just add on. I think there's another weird thing that goes on. Like when you saw Batman 89, you rushed to a comic shop or you bought Batman
Mhm.
comics. I think now what oftentimes happens is the publishers benefit more with the bound copies, with graphic
Yeah,
novels and
the trades.
collections. So, if there's a Marvel movie, kids aren't necessarily going to the comic shop for the first time, but every airport has a kiosk with Penguin Random House Marvel, trade paperbacks. And like, oh yeah, let me get that. Where kids were going back and buying all the bound volumes of Walking Dead or even Paper Girls a couple of years ago. So there is a little bit of that where it goes to get folks, but the comic wins come from things like Absolute Batman, which I don't even understand, but drives a lot of people into stores and people buy it.
I'd love to get your guys' reaction to some news that broke at New York Comic Con. Um, Mego, and it was announced that they're putting out the Atlas Comics figures from the short-lived line in the 70s. We had Jeff Rovin on. He was talking about how there are plans in place to build this out with more figures, um, possibly movies, possibly TV. This, all the things you would look for in a blueprint to bring these things up. Are you seeing now, or do you feel now that people are looking at these properties and saying, you know what, we can start our own DCU, MCU, not to get involved with them, but there's a lot of content out there like Captain Action that we can build our own universe with?
Yeah. Yeah, let me just start a couple observations, then Michael will give you the real answer. But number one, I heard a crazy stat that like The Boys is the most watched comic book movie or those boys characters. So I think there's room for like, more characters to come onto the radar for folks. And then strangely enough, when Joe and I started Captain Action, like 15 plus years ago, there was a whole class of like young entrepreneur people who kind of came in, and the guys who were doing Atlas back then were like part of our class,
Oh,
and
okay.
we were partying with them at those early New York Comic Cons, and then they, Arden, they kind of rose and fell and they did some great stuff. And now it's a new group coming in, and I think that like a moth to the flame, folks are drawn to this because if 100 things go right, it'll click. And at any given point, one of those things can go wrong, but that's kind of the thrill. You can see, oh, if all these things go right, it can click, and wouldn't that be fun? Wouldn't that be cool?
I think the one way to look at it is it kind of harkens back to what Ed was talking about. So Ed, you did have the answer. You just
Oh,
didn't know
good. I expect you to be, no, that's wrong.
it. Yeah, no, no, no. So I've worked on franchise properties and I've worked on, individual titles. And one of the biggest mistakes, well, I shouldn't say mistakes. It's an aspirational thing, right? Everybody wants to create a franchise. I want to create, I can see it. I can see the universe. I can see all the characters. I can see it all. But in truth, you have to start with one thing that does exceedingly well. If J.K. Rowling did not write Harry Potter as this compelling book, YA novel, then franchise doesn't exist. You can plan all the franchises you want, but if that book isn't good or those characters aren't compelling and you don't want to see more of them, I don't care how much franchise you want to have as the owner of the property, it's never going to happen. So you have to put your eggs in the basket of creating a compelling story with characters that people can relate to or at least want to escape with for a period of time. And I think that we've all seen it. We've seen the formula of I've got this character set. I've got this writer. I've got this distribution platform. It's going to turn into this universe, and I've got it planned out for 12 movies. And you kind of forget about the first movie or the first comic book or the first whatever because you're take your eye off the ball. And I think that to me is the most critical and important. It doesn't matter, and it's the first mover kind of at least in my humble opinion. There's like a first mover proposition where that first mover could be a comic book, it could be a YA novel, it could be a toy, like Captain Action. That's where it started, and then it branches out from there.
The original book, and toy, what made it stand out so much is that it did have that it had those licensed properties with DC and Marvel. He could become Captain America. He could become Superman. Going forward, is that something you want to look at, or is he going to have a different set of specialties where he could become different characters, but none that are in other, comic book companies?
So for the toy, or I should say the collectible action figures, it really is like to use like Hot Toys in terms of its quality level. That action figure will have uniform sets. There's a big announcement that we're going to be making, which we unfortunately can't make right this second, but in like a week or so,
I wish we
with
could, Oren. It's a cool thing.
it's a big one. But we have the Rocketeer, we have a few others that are lined up within that space. Mars Attacks, that's been announced. So there's some cool, bad guy, good guy correlations for us to go with. Plus we're adding major action. So now we can have, if we were to do, Black Panther costume, now it makes sense. We can have a black character represented within that space.
Mhm.
So yes, that is, and from a toy perspective, it makes sense because you can create the license, you can sell things separately, and licensing is accustomed to it, even though it's not as easy as it was in, the 1960s, but it's definitely something we can do. As far as media and storytelling, we're taking a slightly different approach because we're not going to be able to do those things. But it's something that will delight collectors of toys.
Mhm.
It will delight all the kidults out there who have fond memories, but also people who just love 1/6 scale or toys and can use their imagination. So we're one of you go back to the publishing aspect. One of the things I'm considering doing, I've got a full-on feature-length script that's done and dusted that right now I'm considering turning into graphic novels because it would be a great way to vet and curate story to make sure that we're on the right track and making that work. So yeah, there's a slightly different approach in terms of licensed in some areas and not necessarily directly licensed in others, and that's just because we need to adapt based on the uh, environment within the licensing community.
And Ed, for you, because I just know how passionate you are about this and comics. I know you can't talk a lot about it, but when you see this stuff kind of come together and you see all these collaborations happening, I mean, you must be a kid in a candy shop with all this.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like, yeah, when we got, when I was a kid, I never had that Spider-Man outfit for Captain Action. And then when we made one, what, 10, 11 years ago, and like the boxes came to my house, I was doing cartwheels. It's like, oh man, like how great. And then like, you know, a little kid down the street, you'd give it to him for a gift. And, the parents say like, holy smokes, the kid loves it. And you're just like so fulfilled. And then even as a, an older fan, we showed the Rocketeer a couple weeks ago, and the attendance was amazing. We had these people come out like fathers and sons who had seen it way back when, and people talked about their passion for it, and I'm like, yeah, this is what it's all about. This is why, like, geez, I like The Rocketeer. I love David Stevens' artwork. I admire his story and his entrepreneurism, but at the end of the day, when you're talking to some fan about how much The Rocketeer means to them and how they can't wait to get a hold of it. Yeah, that's a great feeling. That's just fantastic.
And
One quick thing to add. I'm sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
It's one quick thing to add to that is if you think about um, Batman, for example, or the Flash, having that character uh, is great and interesting, but what makes it even more interesting is the rogues gallery around him. So that's something that we've always had just a single bad guy. So we did introduce a new character called Professor Fangs
Mhm.
at San Diego, and the intent there is to start expanding that universe of this rogues gallery. So if you've got, Dr. Evil as the science uh, version, now you have Professor Fangs as the occult or supernatural version.
I was saying for Michael, for you, I mean, growing out this universe and being part of it all, um, has it been sort of a thrilling experience for you as well?
Yeah, I mean, you know, the beauty is having a character name and some history behind it, but it's not as well defined uh, where you're hitting all these roadblocks because, well, that's not canon. That's not canon. We can't do that. It is the world is our oyster in terms of being able to go out and create, which makes it super fun. It's way more fun than I'd ever anticipated it being.
Yeah. And we're able to do some funky things too. So like we had two crazy team ups. We just teamed up with Al Capone Vampire Hunter with Jeff Vaughn, who you know from Ithacon. And like that book was a riot. And can't wait for it to get out. And we're also working with Don Simpson, also a frequent Ithacon guest. And we're part of this giant sprawling Megaton Man team up book he has. And if we were, a big corporate brand or, King Features, with different characters, I don't think we could do that sort of thing. But, we worked hard and we work hard to make sure they fit. At first glance, it's like, this is too weird. And, we kind of think about it and scratch our heads for a while, and then it works. And then it's really, really cool. So that gets so exciting.
So, guys, I mean, right now, I know you talked about the figures. Is there anything out right now that fans can look forward to or fans can get their hands on at this point?
Oh,
Absolutely. We have both a Captain Action 1/6 scale figure
Mhm.
as well as a Rocketeer uniform set that are available. They are Hot Toys quality. They are beautiful. In fact, we're running a special promotion right now where if you are once you're going to check out,
Mhm.
if you're going to get the Captain Action uniform or the Rocketeer uniform set, if you use in all caps, it's just Actioneers, Actioneers, you can get $15 off of each of the uh, pieces, or if you buy the bundle and you put in "Join Us" all in caps, you can get $30 off the bundle.
Wow.
But they are gorgeous, gorgeous figures.
I'd say these are absolutely spot on.
yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm sure, with the holidays coming up, folks are going to be trying to grab these as fast as they can.
Yeah, just go to captainaction.com and
Okay.
it'll bring you right to the site where you can pick
Awesome.
this stuff up. And there's a bunch of other items on there. Funko Pop. We've got the original comics done by Wally Wood and Company.
Okay.
We even got a Dr. Evil skateboard, which that was done by this guy Tim Barron, who does a lot of work with Tony Hawk.
Those are awesome. Yeah, he's a fantastic artist. I just got a poster of his not that long ago, but That's
Oh, you did? Oh, cool.
yeah. Well, this looks like awesome stuff, guys, and I can't wait for folks to get their hands on it and see it out there. Well, I can't wait to hear about this announcement, and I can't wait to see the trajectory of this because I know how hard you guys are working on it. I'm excited about it. I know there's a lot of excitement in the comic community about it, and just want to thank you guys for coming on and wish you guys the best of luck. And I love to have you guys back on when this thing really starts moving to talk about it some more. And we're back. So yeah, there's a lot going on. These guys have been working very hard for a long time. Things are picking up traction, picking up the pace, and it seems like there's a plan to really get Captain Action back out into the forefront. It's a way for new fans to get involved, for older fans to relive what they love so much about the character. And between Ed and Michael, I mean, they are in really good hands with this. We can't wait to have them back to hear when this thing really starts to take off. And I know it will because the two guys behind the scene for it. So, guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. And we have a big slate of shows for you guys next week. You're going to love it. I guarantee that. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.